Driving past my son's law firm, I spotted my daughter-in-law's SUV parked in his reserved spot. She was supposed to be in the Bahamas right now. Something felt terribly wrong. I slipped inside to surprise them, only to overhear their cold plan to steal my $2 million retirement fund. They thought the old man would never notice. I quietly smiled. My lawyer was already preparing to make them pay. Their faces went white when he suddenly appeared. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 68 years old, living in Plano, Texas, a quiet suburb of Dallas where the lawns are always green and the neighbors wave when you drive by. I spent 35 years as a chief accountant for one of the biggest construction companies in the state. Numbers were my life. Balance sheets, ledgers, decimal points that had to be perfect down to the last cent. Now I'm retired. I play chess at the Dallas Chess Foundation every Saturday, collect antique pocket watches, and take morning walks in the park. A simple life. A good life, or so I thought. My son Derek wasn't always the man he is today. I remember the boy who used to sit on my lap while I explained how compound interest worked. He'd scrunch up his face, pretending to understand, then ask if we could get ice cream instead. "Dad, can numbers wait? I want chocolate chip." I'd laugh and carry him to the car, his small hand gripping my finger like I was the most important person in the world. I remember the young man who called me from law school, voice cracking with excitement. "Dad, I passed the bar exam." I drove 6 hours that night just to take him out to dinner. We sat at a steakhouse in Austin until midnight, talking about his dreams, his plans, the kind of lawyer he wanted to be. "I want to help people, Dad, the ones who can't help themselves." I was so proud I couldn't stop smiling for a week. But something changed. It happened gradually, the way rust creeps across metal. You don't notice until it's too late. The ambitious young lawyer who wanted to help people started talking about billable hours and client retention rates. The son who called me every Sunday started calling every other week, then once a month. 3 years into his marriage to Melissa, Derek stopped visiting altogether. Phone calls became shorter, more distant. "Busy with the firm, Dad. You understand?" I understood, or I told myself I did. The truth was harder to swallow. My son was drowning and I didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. Melissa Crawford, now Melissa Bennett, entered our lives 8 years ago. She was beautiful in that polished way, like a showroom car that looks perfect but has no engine under the hood. Blonde hair always styled, nails always manicured, smile always ready, but never reaching her eyes. The first time Derek brought her to my house, she looked around my living room like she was appraising it for auction. Her gaze swept over my furniture, my books, the family photos on the mantel. "Charming," she said, and somehow made it sound like an insult. I noticed how her eyes lingered on my antique clock collection. Not with appreciation, with calculation. I could almost see her mentally adding up values. "That grandfather clock belonged to my father," I told her, testing. "How sentimental," she replied and turned away. Over the years, Melissa built walls between Derek and me. Family dinners became too complicated to schedule. Holiday visits turned into brief phone calls. "Derek's so busy with work," she'd explain, though I noticed she never seemed too busy for her spa weekends or shopping trips. When I did see them, she'd make little comments, designed to cut without leaving visible wounds. "Oh, Harold, you're wearing that shirt again?" "Derek, maybe we should take your father shopping sometime. Help him update his wardrobe." Or, "Derek, maybe your father should sit down. At his age, standing too long can be dangerous. We wouldn't want him to have a fall." She said it with a smile, always with a smile. The kind of smile a cat gives a mouse before deciding it's not hungry yet. Derek would just laugh nervously. "Melissa's just joking, Dad." But I saw how he looked at her, not with love, but with something closer to fear. My son, the lawyer who could argue anyone into a corner, couldn't say no to his own wife. That Wednesday changed everything. I was driving back from my morning walk at the park. My usual route takes me past downtown Dallas, and I often pass by Derek's office building on Commerce Street, Bennett and Associates, 5th floor. He named his firm after our family name, which used to make me proud. I noticed the white Lexus RX in the parking lot, reserved spot number 340. Derek's spot. But it wasn't Derek's car. It was Melissa's. Strange. She was supposed to be in the Bahamas with her girlfriends. Had been talking about that trip for months. A week of sun and relaxation, she'd announced at our last awkward dinner together. I simply must get away from all this stress. I pulled into a visitor spot. Maybe she'd changed her plans. Maybe Derek needed the car. My accountant's brain was already cataloging inconsistencies, but I pushed the thoughts aside. I'd just pop in, say hello, maybe take them both to lunch. A nice surprise. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt longer than usual. The hallway was empty. Derek's secretary must have been on break. The door to his office was slightly ajar, and I could hear voices. I raised my hand to knock, then froze. $2 million, Derek, Melissa's voice, sharp as broken glass. $2 million just sitting there, rotting in his accounts, while we're drowning in debt. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart suddenly pounding like I'd run a marathon. Keep your voice down, Derek hissed. The walls aren't exactly soundproof. Who's going to hear us? Your secretary went to lunch, and no one else comes to this floor. Now focus. Your father has $2 million in his retirement accounts. $2 million that could solve all our problems. I stopped breathing. I stood there, frozen against that wall, feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. Through the crack in the door, I could see slivers of movement. Melissa pacing, Derek slumped in his chair like a puppet with cut strings. The durable power of attorney is our best option, Melissa continued. Once he signs it, we have full access to everything. Checking, savings, the retirement fund, all of it. He won't sign it. Derek's voice was weak. You don't know him. He reads every document 3 times. Then we don't give him a choice. I heard the click of her heels stopping. Your colleague, Brian Shaw. He forges signatures, doesn't he? For $15,000, he'll make us a document your father never has to see. My mind flashed back to a memory I'd buried deep. Derek at 12 years old, crying because some kids at school had stolen his lunch money. I'd driven to that school, sat him down, and said, Son, there are people in this world who take because they think they can. Your job is to be smarter than them. He'd looked at me with those big eyes and nodded. I'll be smart, Dad, I promise. What happened to that boy? And if the power of attorney doesn't work? Derek asked. Plan B? Melissa's voice turned cold. We file for guardianship. Claim he's mentally incompetent. I've already started collecting evidence. I recorded him last month when he forgot where he put his reading glasses. I've been meeting with a doctor who'll say whatever we need for the right price. I remembered that visit. Melissa had stopped by unexpectedly, asked me about my day. I'd been searching for my glasses, had left them in the kitchen instead of my study. She'd watched me look, that same cat smile on her face. Memory trouble, Harold. That's concerning at your age. I'd laughed it off. Old age, I'd joked. Happens to the best of us. She wasn't joking. She was building a case. Another memory surfaced, unbidden. Derek at 25, just starting his career. He'd called me late one night, worried about a case he couldn't win. What do I do, Dad? The evidence is against my client. You do what's right, I told him, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. That's what separates good men from bad ones. Now my son was planning to forge my signature and have me declared mentally unfit. For money. For $2 million I'd spent 35 years earning, one balanced ledger at a time. What about after? Derek asked. He's going to figure it out eventually. By then we'll have transferred everything to offshore accounts. He can't fight what he can't find. Besides, who's going to believe a confused old man over a respected attorney and his wife? I felt something shift inside me. The shock was fading, replaced by something colder, something sharper. In my 35 years of accounting, I'd seen every kind of fraud, embezzlement schemes, tax evasion, creative bookkeeping that would make a fiction writer jealous. I'd caught them all because I understood one simple truth. Criminals always leave a trail. Numbers don't lie. Neither do words spoken when you think no one's listening. I pulled out my phone, hands steady despite everything. One tap. Record. So we agree? Melissa asked. Brian forges the documents, we get control of the accounts, and if that falls through, we go the guardianship route. I don't see another way, Derek said. The firm's hemorrhaging money. We owe $340,000 on business loans, another $180,000 in personal debt. Without Dad's money? Without his money, we lose everything. Melissa's heels clicked again, moving toward the door. I'm going to get coffee. When I come back, I want a timeline. This happens within the month, Derek. I'm not waiting anymore. I slipped away from the door, moving silently down the hall toward the stairwell. My footsteps made no sound. 35 years of walking quietly through offices while colleagues worked had trained me well. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, not trusting myself to stand still. In my car, I sat for a long moment, staring at nothing. Then I pulled out the small notebook I always kept in my glove box, old habits from my accounting days, and began to write. Brian Shaw, 15,000, power of attorney, guardianship, doctor on payroll, 340,000 in business debt, 180,000 personal, numbers, facts, evidence. I looked at my notes, at the phone still recording in my pocket, at the building where my son was planning to steal everything I'd worked for. A chess game. That's what this was. And Melissa thought she was playing against a confused old man who couldn't find his reading glasses. I allowed myself a small smile. You want to play chess? I said quietly to no one. Fine, but you have no idea who you're sitting across from. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. I had phone calls to make, a bank to visit, and a game to win. They thought they knew me, the harmless old father, the easy target, the $2 million waiting to be plucked. They were about to learn that this particular accountant had spent decades catching people smarter than them, and I never lost a single audit. The next morning I woke before dawn. Sleep had been elusive, not from anxiety, but from planning. My mind had been running calculations all night, the way it used to before major audits. Assets, liabilities, vulnerabilities. Except this time the numbers weren't on a spreadsheet. They were my family. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, watching the sunrise paint the sky over Plano in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful, peaceful. And somewhere across town, my son and his wife were plotting to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could steal my retirement fund. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my entire career protecting companies from internal fraud, and I never saw the theft happening under my own roof. I thought about Melissa's visits over the past year, always unexpected, always with that concerned smile that never quite reached her eyes. Just checking in on you, Harold. Derek worries, you know. She'd wander through my house, asking about my day, my health, my plans. I thought she was finally warming up to me. Now I understood. She was casing the joint, looking for evidence of mental decline, building her case one misplaced pair of glasses at a time. That woman had sat at my dinner table, eaten food I'd prepared, and smiled at me while planning to take everything I had. The thought made my coffee taste bitter. After breakfast, I drove to First Texas National Bank on Preston Road. The branch manager, Marcus Webb, was a careful man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and the cautious demeanor of someone who'd seen too many financial disasters. Mr. Bennett, Marcus said, rising from his desk, what brings you in today? I need to review all access requests on my accounts for the past 3 months, and I want to update my security protocols. Something in my tone must have caught his attention. His professional smile faded. Let me pull those records. What he found confirmed my worst suspicions. 3 separate requests for account information, each claiming to be from a representative acting on my behalf. 2 had been denied due to lack of proper authorization. The third had managed to obtain a general balance inquiry by providing my social security number and date of birth, information any family member would know. This is concerning, Marcus said, frowning at his screen. Do you have any idea who might be making these requests? I did, but I wasn't ready to show my hand yet. Let's just say I want to make sure my accounts are secure. Over the next hour, we implemented new security measures. Any transaction over $500 now required a personal phone call to confirm. I established a code word, checkmate, that would need to be provided for any major changes. All previous authorizations were revoked and replaced with new protocols. Marcus printed the paperwork, and I signed every page, my signature clear and steady. Let them try to claim my handshakes too much to write. That evening, I searched online for attorneys specializing in elder law and fraud protection. The results were overwhelming. Dozens of firms promising aggressive representation. But I wasn't looking for aggressive. I was looking for thorough, methodical. I found Anthony Ramirez through the Texas State Bar's referral service. His profile listed a 4.9 rating, specialization in protecting seniors from financial exploitation, and a track record of successful prosecutions. His client reviews all mentioned the same thing. He was patient, precise, and he won. I scheduled a consultation for the following week. That night, my phone rang. Derek's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring twice, composing myself, then answered with the same warm tone I'd used for 41 years. "Derek, how are you, son?" "Hey, Dad, just calling to check in. How's everything?" I could hear Melissa in the background, her voice a low murmur, coaching him, probably reminding him to ask the right questions. "Oh, same old routine. Chess club, walks in the morning, nothing exciting." I paused. "How's Melissa? Enjoying the Bahamas?" A beat too long before he answered. "She's great. Had to cut the trip short. Work stuff." Interesting. They hadn't even coordinated their lies. "Hey, by the way," Derek continued, his voice trying too hard to sound casual, "you haven't changed anything with your house, right? Any paperwork or documents?" There it was, the question Melissa had put him up to. "The house? No, everything's the same. Why do you ask?" "No reason. Just making sure everything's in order. For the future. For my future in a nursing home while they emptied my accounts. That's thoughtful of you, son. I appreciate you looking out for me." After we hung up, I sat in my armchair looking at my phone. The recording app was still running. Derek's question was now saved alongside everything else. In chess, there's a move called a discovered attack. You move one piece, and in doing so, reveal a threat your opponent never saw coming. They had no idea what was coming. A week later, I sat in the waiting room of Anthony Ramirez's law office on Main Street in Dallas. The space was professional, but not flashy. Leather chairs, legal journals on the coffee table, framed diplomas on the walls. The kind of office that said, "I win cases," rather than "I charge a lot for losing them." Anthony Ramirez was a man in his early 50s, dark hair graying at the temples, with the focused gaze of someone who'd spent decades reading between the lines of legal documents. He stood to shake my hand. Firm grip, no pretense. "Mr. Bennett, please have a seat. You mentioned a situation involving family members and potential financial exploitation." I spent the next 30 minutes laying out everything. The overheard conversation, the plan for forged documents, the backup plan to have me declared incompetent, the name Brian Shaw, the mentions of a doctor who could be bought, the recording on my phone. Ramirez listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. When I finished, he set down his pen. "Mr. Bennett, what you're describing falls under Texas Penal Code, Section 3246, financial exploitation of an elderly individual. If what you've told me is accurate, your son and daughter-in-law are planning a first-degree felony. The potential sentence is up to 99 years in prison." 99 years. For trying to steal from your own father. What do I need to do? First, we need more evidence. The recording is good. Texas is a one-party consent state, so it's legally admissible. But we need to document their actions, not just their words. I'd recommend hiring a private investigator to conduct surveillance. I have a contact, Vincent Cole, former Dallas PD detective. Discreet, thorough, and he knows how to gather evidence that holds up in court. 4 days later, I met Vincent Cole at a coffee shop near White Rock Lake. He was younger than I expected, mid-40s, with a compact build and watchful eyes that seemed to notice everything and register nothing. He wore a plain gray jacket and drank his coffee black. Former cop, I thought. They always take it black. "Mr. Bennett," he slid into the booth across from me. "Ramirez briefed me on the basics. What specifically do you need?" I laid out the details. Brian Shaw, the forger Derek had mentioned, the doctor Melissa was working with, the meetings they'd been having without my knowledge. "I can have preliminary results within 2 weeks," Cole said. "Photos, schedules, any meetings they take. If they're moving forward with this plan, I'll find the evidence. And the cost? $3,000 for the initial phase. More if we need extended surveillance." I didn't hesitate. $3,000 was nothing compared to $2 million, and more importantly, It was nothing compared to proving that Harold Bennett was nobody's fool. We shook hands, and Cole disappeared into the morning crowd. I watched him go, thinking about the chessboard taking shape in my mind. The same afternoon, I ran into my neighbor, Nancy Parker, while getting my mail. Nancy was a pleasant woman in her early 60s, the kind of neighbor who knew everyone's business, but shared it out of concern rather than malice. "Harold, I've been meaning to ask, is everything all right with your family?" "Why do you ask, Nancy?" "Oh, it's probably nothing. But I saw your daughter-in-law at your house about a month ago. You weren't home. I noticed your car was gone. She was there for about an hour. I assumed she was picking something up for you, but she was fiddling with the side door for quite a while before she got in." I kept my face neutral, though my stomach tightened. She was probably just checking on something for Derek. You know how they worry about me. Nancy nodded, relieved. "Of course. Such a caring family?" "Caring. Right." As soon as I got inside, I went straight to my study. I keep my important documents in a specific order: Social Security card on top, then birth certificate, then property deeds, then financial statements. It's a system I've used for decades. Everything in its place, every place with its purpose. The folder with my financial records was third from the bottom. It should have been fifth. Someone had been through my files. Someone had been looking at my account numbers, my balances, my investment statements. Someone had been planning exactly how much they could steal. I sat down heavily. The violation felt worse than the conversation I'd overheard. My own home, my private space. They'd invaded it, pawed through my life, and thought I'd never notice. But I noticed. I always noticed. That was what made me good at my job, and that was what would make me good at this. My phone buzzed. A text from Vincent Cole. "Shaw located, following up on the doctor lead. We'll have preliminary report by week's end." I texted back, "Good." 3 days later, Cole called. "Mr. Bennett, I have photos. Your son met with a man named Brian Shaw yesterday afternoon. Coffee shop on Greenville Avenue. Shaw has 2 prior convictions, forgery and fraud. He did 18 months in state prison. Anything else? Shaw was carrying a manila envelope when he arrived. He didn't have it when he left. Documents. They were already preparing the forgeries. Keep watching them," I said. "I want to know every move they make." Understood. I hung up and looked out my window at the quiet street, the manicured lawns, the peaceful suburban afternoon. Somewhere out there, my son was paying a convicted forger to steal my signature. My daughter-in-law was bribing a doctor to declare me incompetent. They thought they were so clever, so careful, so far ahead of the old man with the failing memory. They had no idea that the old man was 3 moves ahead of them, and the trap was almost ready to spring. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of watching, waiting, and preparing. Cole's reports came in like clockwork. Photos, timestamps, meetings documented with precision. The pieces were falling into place. Then the invitation came. Derek called on a Tuesday evening, his voice carrying that artificial warmth I'd learned to recognize. "Dad, Melissa and I were thinking we should have dinner. Just the 3 of us. Catch up properly. What do you say?" I knew exactly what this was. The setup. The ambush. They were ready to make their move, and they wanted me comfortable, unsuspecting, grateful for the attention. "That sounds wonderful, Derek. Where were you thinking?" "Del Frisco's, downtown Dallas. Our treat, of course." Del Frisco's. One of the most expensive steakhouses in the city. Nothing says, "Please sign over your life savings." Quite like a $200 steak. I almost admired their commitment to the charade. "I'd love that. When?" "Thursday, 7 o'clock. I smiled into the phone. "I'll be there." After hanging up, I called Ramirez. "They're making their move. Thursday evening, Del Frisco's downtown." "Perfect," he said. "I'll be ready. Just text me when you want me to appear." Thursday arrived with perfect spring weather, the kind of evening that makes you believe good things are coming. I dressed carefully. Navy blazer, crisp white shirt, pressed slacks. If this was going to be a performance, I intended to look the part. Del Frisco's was everything I expected. Dim lighting, leather booths, the quiet murmur of expensive conversations and clinking glasses. Derek and Melissa were already seated when I arrived, positioned at a corner table with a view of the entrance. Strategic, I noted. They wanted to see me coming. "Dad!" Derek rose to embrace me. The hug felt hollow, rehearsed. "You look great." "Harold," Melissa said, offering her cheek for a kiss I didn't give. "So wonderful to see you." We settled into our seats. A waiter appeared, took our drink orders. Melissa ordered an expensive Cabernet. Derek got scotch. I asked for water with lemon. "Not drinking tonight, Dad?" Derek asked. "I like to keep a clear head these days." Melissa's smile flickered just for a moment. So responsible. The small talk was excruciating. "How's the house?" "Fine." "How's the chess club?" "Fine." Every word dripped with false interest. Every question designed to probe without appearing to probe. Then, as our steaks arrived, Melissa leaned forward, with that concerned expression I'd come to despise. "Harold, we've been worried about you. Living alone in that big house. It must be difficult. I manage. Of course you do. But we want to make sure you're protected. That's why—" She glanced at Derek, who produced a manila folder from under the table. "We thought it might be time to discuss some practical arrangements." Derek slid the folder across the table. "It's just a durable power of attorney, Dad. Standard stuff. In case something happens, a medical emergency, anything like that, we'd be able to help manage your affairs. Take care of things." I picked up the folder, opened it slowly. The document inside was professionally printed. Full and unrestricted access to all financial accounts. Authority to make decisions on my behalf. No expiration date. "This is quite thorough," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "We wanted to make sure everything was covered," Melissa said, "for your protection." I looked up at them, my son, who couldn't meet my eyes, and his wife, who couldn't stop watching mine. Two people who thought they were about to win. "You know," I said, setting down the document, "it's a funny coincidence. I've also been thinking about legal matters lately." Derek's smile faltered. "Oh?" "Yes. In fact," I pulled out my phone. "I thought we might want a professional opinion." I pressed the call button. "What are you doing?" Melissa asked, her voice suddenly sharp. "Getting some advice." The restaurant's entrance opened, and a man in a tailored gray suit walked in. He spotted our table and approached with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was going. "Good evening," Anthony Ramirez said, pulling up a chair. "I'm Mr. Bennett's attorney. I understand there's a document you'd like him to sign." The transformation was instantaneous. Derek's face went pale, the blood draining from his cheeks like water from a bathtub. Melissa's composure cracked, her eyes widening before she could control the reaction. Ramirez picked up the power of attorney and read through it. "Interesting," he said finally. "This document grants full control over all financial accounts, with no limitations on withdrawals, no expiration date, no oversight requirements." He looked at Derek. "As an attorney yourself, you must know how unusual these terms are. Most POAs include safeguards. This one has none." Derek's mouth opened, but no words came out. Melissa found her voice first. "This is ridiculous. We're just trying to help Harold." Ramirez smiled thinly. "Of course you are." He slid the document back. "My client declines to sign. And I should mention, if you're considering filing for guardianship based on alleged cognitive decline, we have documentation from an independent geriatric specialist confirming Mr. Bennett's complete mental competency." Derek's hand trembled as he reached for his scotch. Melissa's face had gone from pale to flushed. "I think," Ramirez continued, "it would be wise to reconsider your next steps very carefully." The dinner ended shortly after that. Derek mumbled something about needing to leave. Melissa gathered her purse with shaking hands, and they practically fled the restaurant. I watched them go, feeling something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, but sadness. This was my son, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd believed in, and he'd chosen this. Ramirez finished his coffee. He'd ordered one after they left, apparently in no hurry, and reviewed the evening's events with professional satisfaction. "That went well," he said. "They're scared now. Scared people make mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" "The desperate kind. They'll either back off entirely or double down. Given what you've told me about your daughter-in-law, I'm betting on option 2. He was right. 10 days later, I received a certified letter, official court documents from the Collin County Courthouse. A petition for guardianship had been filed, naming me as the proposed ward and Derek Bennett as the proposed guardian. The grounds: significant cognitive decline, an inability to manage personal and financial affairs. Attached were exhibits, video recordings, timestamps showing Melissa's visits to my house, medical evaluation from a Dr. Henry Walters, stating that I showed clear signs of early-stage dementia and recommending immediate intervention, sworn statements from Derek describing concerning episodes of confusion and memory loss. I sat at my kitchen table, reading through the lies. Each page was more elaborate than the last, a carefully constructed narrative designed to strip away everything I'd worked for. I called Ramirez. "They filed," I said. "I know. I got a copy this morning." His voice was calm, almost pleased. "They've gone all in, Mr. Bennett. That's exactly what we wanted." "How is this what we wanted?" "Because now they're committed. They've put everything in writing, filed it with the court, attached evidence that we can examine and challenge. They've shown us their entire hand." I could hear him smiling through the phone. "And we're about to show them ours." The next morning, Ramirez filed a counter motion challenging the guardianship petition. He requested full discovery of all evidence, including the original video files and Dr. Walters' complete medical records. He also filed a separate complaint alleging harassment and elder abuse. Meanwhile, Vincent Cole had been busy. "Got something interesting," he told me when we met at our usual coffee shop. He slid a folder across the table. "Bank records. Your daughter-in-law made 2 wire transfers in the past month. $15,000 to an account belonging to Brian Shaw. $8,000 to an account belonging to Dr. Henry Walters." I stared at the numbers. $15,000 for the forger. $8,000 for the doctor. $23,000 spent trying to steal $2 million. "There's more," Cole continued. "I did some digging into your son's finances. His firm, Bennett and Associates, is $340,000 in debt. Personal credit cards, another $180,000. Total exposure, $520,000. $500,000 in debt. No wonder they were desperate. The firm's losing clients," Cole added. "He's had 4 major accounts terminate in the past 6 months. At this rate, he'll be bankrupt within a year." I thought about Derek at 25, full of dreams about helping people. Now he was drowning in debt, married to a woman who saw my retirement fund as their escape hatch. When had he become this person? When had he decided that stealing from his father was easier than facing his own failures? Ramirez called that evening with another update. "We got the discovery materials. The video recordings are interesting. They show you doing completely normal things, looking for your glasses, pausing to remember a word. Nothing that indicates cognitive decline. If anything, they prove you're functioning perfectly well." "And the doctor?" "Dr. Henry Walters. I looked into him. He's had 3 malpractice complaints in the past 5 years. His practice is struggling. An $8,000 payment from your daughter-in-law would certainly help his cash flow." "Can we prove the payment was a bribe?" "We have the bank records showing the transfer. Combined with the timing, payment made 2 weeks before he signed the evaluation, it creates a compelling circumstantial case. But here's the thing, Mr. Bennett." His voice took on that satisfied tone again. "We have enough evidence right now to file criminal charges, conspiracy to commit fraud, elder financial exploitation, bribery of a medical professional. So why haven't we?" "Because I have a better idea. We wait until the guardianship hearing. We let them present their case, the videos, the doctor's testimony, all of it. We let them think they're winning." He paused. "And then we destroy them in open court, with a judge watching. That way, when we present our evidence to the district attorney, it won't just be allegations. It will be a documented pattern of fraud, exposed under oath." I understood. In chess, the most satisfying victories aren't the quick ones. They're the ones where your opponent thinks they're winning, right up until the moment they realize they've lost. "The hearing is scheduled for next month," Ramirez said. "They'll bring everything they have, and we'll be ready." I hung up and looked at the folder Cole had given me. Bank transfers, debt records, a paper trail of desperation and greed. My son and his wife had built their trap with meticulous care, never realizing they were the ones being surrounded. The game was entering its final phase, and they still had no idea who they were playing against. The hearing arrived on a crisp morning in mid-May. The Collin County Courthouse was a modern building, all glass and steel, designed to look impressive rather than intimidating. But walking through those doors, I felt the weight of what was about to happen. Judge Patricia Foster presided over the guardianship proceedings. She was a stern woman in her 60s with silver hair and glasses that seemed to magnify her sharp gaze. The kind of judge who'd seen every trick in the book and had no patience for nonsense. I sat at the respondent's table with Ramirez. Across the aisle, Derek sat alone. He'd chosen to represent himself, probably because he couldn't afford another attorney after paying for Melissa's separate counsel. Melissa sat behind him with a woman in a navy suit, her own lawyer. This hearing will determine whether Harold Bennett should be placed under guardianship due to alleged cognitive decline, Judge Foster announced. Mr. Derek Bennett, you've filed the petition. Present your case. Derek stood, shuffling papers nervously. Gone was the confident lawyer I'd watched build his career. In his place was a man grasping at straws, trying to maintain a facade that was already crumbling. Your Honor, my father is a good man, but he's showing signs of serious mental decline. We have video evidence of concerning behaviors and medical testimony confirming our observations. He played Melissa's videos first. I watched myself on the screen, looking for my glasses, pausing mid-sentence while searching for a word, forgetting where I'd left my car keys. Normal moments that everyone experiences edited together to create a narrative of incompetence. Then Dr. Henry Walters took the stand. He was a thin man with nervous eyes and a practiced demeanor that didn't quite hide his discomfort. In my professional opinion, he testified, Mr. Bennett shows clear signs of early-stage cognitive impairment, memory lapses, confusion, difficulty with routine tasks. Without proper supervision, I believe he's at risk of being exploited or making poor financial decisions. The irony was rich enough to taste. Finally, Melissa took the witness stand. She was dressed conservatively. Modest jewelry, understated makeup, the picture of a concerned daughter-in-law. When she spoke, her voice trembled with rehearsed emotion. We just want to protect Harold. He's alone in that big house, and we worry about him constantly. What if something happens? What if someone takes advantage of him? She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. We're his family. We love him. We just want to keep him safe. It was an impressive performance. If I hadn't heard her planning to steal my money, I might have been moved. Judge Foster turned to our table. Mr. Ramirez, your response? Ramirez stood slowly, buttoning his jacket with the calm deliberation of a man holding a royal flush. Thank you, Your Honor. We'd like to call our first witness, Dr. Catherine Moreno, board-certified geriatric psychiatrist. Dr. Moreno was a respected specialist I'd never met before Ramirez arranged the evaluation. She'd spent 3 hours examining me, running cognitive tests, reviewing my medical history. Mr. Bennett's cognitive function is well within normal parameters for his age, she testified. His memory, reasoning, and decision-making abilities show no signs of impairment. In my professional opinion, this man is fully capable of managing his own affairs. A second expert, Dr. James Crawford, confirmed the findings. 2 independent specialists, both agreeing I was mentally competent. Then Ramirez began his cross-examination of Melissa. Mrs. Bennett, you testified that you're concerned about your father-in-law being exploited. Is that correct? Yes, of course. And you want to protect his finances from people who might take advantage of him? Absolutely. Ramirez walked to his table and picked up a folder. Then perhaps you can explain this. He handed a document to the judge and placed a copy in front of Melissa. This is a bank record showing a wire transfer of $15,000 from your personal account to an account belonging to Brian Shaw. Melissa's face went pale. Her lawyer leaned forward, suddenly alert. Who is Brian Shaw, Mrs. Bennett? I don't know what you're... Brian Shaw has 2 prior convictions for forgery and fraud. He served 18 months in state prison. Ramirez produced another document. And this is a photograph of your husband meeting with Mr. Shaw at a coffee shop, taken by a licensed private investigator. Derek's face had gone the color of old milk. His hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly I could see his knuckles, turning white. Mrs. Bennett, why did you pay $15,000 to a convicted forger? Melissa's lawyer stood. Objection, this is beyond the scope of... I'll allow it, Judge Foster said, her eyes fixed on Melissa. Answer the question. There's been a misunderstanding. That payment was for consulting work. Consulting work. from a convicted forger. Ramirez let the words hang in the air. Mrs. Bennett, we also have records of an $8,000 payment to Dr. Henry Walters, made 2 weeks before he conducted his evaluation of Mr. Bennett. Would you care to explain that? Melissa's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Judge Foster removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Mr. Ramirez, do you have additional evidence? Yes, Your Honor. Ramirez's voice was calm, but I caught the glint of satisfaction in his eyes. I have an audio recording that I believe the court will find illuminating. The courtroom fell silent as Ramirez connected his phone to the speakers. Judge Foster nodded permission, and he pressed play. Melissa's voice filled the room. $2 million, Derek. $2 million just sitting there, rotting in his accounts, while we're drowning in debt. Then Derek's, keep your voice down. Your colleague, Brian Shaw, he forges signatures, doesn't he? For $15,000, he'll make us a document your father never has to see. The recording continued, every damning word crystal clear, the plan for the power of attorney, the backup plan to claim incompetence, Melissa's admission that she'd been recording me, building a case, Derek's calculations of their debt, $340,000 for the firm, another $180,000 personal. I watched their faces as they listened to themselves plotting my ruin. Derek had gone from pale to gray, his jaw slack, his eyes fixed on the table in front of him. He looked like a man watching his own execution. Melissa was different. Her shock had transformed into barely controlled fury. Her hands clenched into fists in her lap. When the recording ended, the silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Judge Foster spoke first. Mr. Ramirez, how was this recording obtained? My client was visiting his son's office and inadvertently overheard this conversation, Your Honor. Texas is a one-party consent state, making this recording legally admissible. Understood. The judge's voice was ice. She turned to Derek. Mr. Bennett, do you have anything to say? Derek stood slowly. His mouth worked for a moment before words came out. Your Honor, I can explain. Can you? Because what I just heard sounds like a conspiracy to commit fraud against your own father, a scheme to forge documents, bribe a physician, and have a mentally competent man declared incompetent so you could steal his retirement savings. It wasn't. We were just trying to help. Help yourself to $2 million. Judge Foster's gavel came down with a crack that made everyone jump. This petition for guardianship is denied. Mr. Harold Bennett is clearly competent and requires no supervision. She wasn't finished. I'm referring this matter to the Collin County District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. The evidence presented today suggests multiple felonies: conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person, and bribery of a medical professional. She looked at Melissa. I strongly advise both of you to retain criminal defense attorneys. You're going to need them. The gavel came down again. Court is adjourned. Chaos erupted. Melissa's lawyer was speaking urgently in her ear. Derek stood frozen at his table, staring at nothing. Court officers moved through the room, restoring order. I rose slowly, feeling the strange calm that comes after a storm. 2 months of planning, of watching, of waiting, and now it was over. I'd won. But there was one more thing I needed to do. I walked across the aisle to where Derek still stood, motionless. Up close, I could see the fine tremor in his hands, the sheen of sweat on his forehead. He looked up at me with eyes that held fear, shame, and something that might have been a plea for mercy. Dad, his voice cracked. I can explain. Melissa pushed me into this. I held up my hand, stopping him. Around us, the courtroom was emptying, but I didn't care who heard. For 35 years, I worked to build a future. Every overtime hour, every sacrifice, every penny saved, I did it for you, to give you opportunities I never had. I kept my voice steady. I paid for your education. I helped you start your firm. And this is what you chose, not to ask me for help. You chose to steal from me, to have me declared mentally unfit, to lock me away so you could take everything. Derek's face crumpled. Dad, please. You had all of my love, all of my support, and you threw it away for money. I'm sorry. Sorry won't fix this, Derek. You made your choice. Now live with the consequences. I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard Melissa's sharp voice, rising, Derek's broken attempts to respond, but I didn't look back. Ramirez was waiting in the hallway. "That was well handled, Mr. Bennett. The district attorney called. He's very interested in this case. Elder financial exploitation is a priority issue." "What does that mean for Derek and Melissa?" "Criminal charges, almost certainly. Your son could face felony fraud charges. Dr. Walters will likely lose his license. Brian Shaw is already on probation. This sends him back to prison." I looked back at the courtroom doors. My son was still in there, his life falling apart. The boy who used to ask for chocolate chip ice cream. The young man who wanted to help people. Gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. What happens now? You have grounds for a civil lawsuit. Conspiracy to defraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Under Texas law, you could recover triple damages. It wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. But there was justice in the idea of them paying for what they'd tried to do. "File the lawsuit," I said. "Whatever it takes." Ramirez nodded. "I'll have the paperwork ready by end of week." I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Texas sun. Behind me, the machinery of justice was beginning to turn. Criminal charges, civil lawsuits, professional consequences. The dominoes were falling. And I had one more move to make. The weeks that followed the court hearing were like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Every day brought new reports of destruction, and I have to admit, there was a certain satisfaction in watching the consequences unfold. Brian Shaw was arrested first. Cole sent me the news with a brief text. Shaw in custody. Violation of probation plus new conspiracy charges. He's looking at 5 to 10 years. Within days, Shaw's lawyer was calling Ramirez, offering full cooperation in exchange for a lighter sentence. Brian Shaw, the forger my son had paid $15,000 to steal my signature, was now eager to testify against Derek in court. The irony was delicious. Dr. Henry Walters was next. The Texas Medical Board launched an investigation the day after the hearing. His patient records were subpoenaed, his practice scrutinized. When they found the $8,000 payment from Melissa, conveniently made 2 weeks before his fraudulent evaluation of me, his fate was sealed. By midsummer, Dr. Walters had surrendered his medical license rather than face a formal revocation hearing. But the real collapse was Derek's. The local news picked up the story. Dallas attorney faces fraud, charges in scheme to exploit elderly father. The headline was everywhere. Television, newspapers, online forums, where legal professionals discussed ethics violations. Bennett and Associates, the firm my son had named after our family, became synonymous with corruption. His clients fled. In the span of 6 weeks, Derek lost every major account. The phone calls from concerned colleagues became phone calls from process servers. By August, he'd filed for personal bankruptcy, listing debts of $520,000 and assets of almost nothing. I followed the news with the detachment of an accountant reviewing someone else's ledger. Numbers don't lie. Neither do consequences. Then came Melissa's betrayal of her own husband, perhaps the most predictable development of all. Ramirez called me on a Tuesday morning with the news. "Your daughter-in-law filed for divorce yesterday. Cited irreconcilable differences, though I suspect the real reason is that sinking ships make poor investments." I wasn't surprised. Melissa had always been calculating. When the money disappeared, so did whatever passed for her loyalty. "There's more," Ramirez continued. "She's trying to distance herself from the fraud charges. Her lawyer is arguing she was manipulated by Derek, that she was just following her husband's lead." I laughed, actually laughed out loud. Melissa? Following anyone's lead? She was the mastermind. Derek couldn't plan a trip to the grocery store without her direction. I know, and so does the prosecutor. But she's offering to testify against Derek in exchange for reduced charges. The DA is considering it. The woman who'd orchestrated the entire scheme was now selling out her husband to save herself. It would have been sad if it weren't so fitting. Meanwhile, my civil lawsuit was proceeding. Ramirez had filed claims for conspiracy to defraud and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Under Texas law, successful plaintiffs in fraud cases could recover triple damages, meaning my $60,000 in legal fees and investigator costs could become a $180,000 judgment. They can't pay, Ramirez reminded me. Derek's bankrupt, and Melissa's assets are tangled in the divorce. Even if we win, collection will be difficult. I know, I said, but the judgment will follow them. Every background check, every credit application, every professional licensing review. They'll have to explain why they have a 6-figure fraud judgment against them. Some victories are about more than money. By late summer, the criminal case was taking shape. The Collin County District Attorney, a man named Michael Jenkins, who had built his career on protecting vulnerable populations, decided to make an example of my son. The charges were filed in August: conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person, bribery of a witness. Derek faced up to 20 years in prison. Melissa's deal came through in early September. In exchange for her testimony and a guilty plea to reduced charges, she would receive 3 years of probation and a $25,000 restitution payment. No prison time. I received the news without emotion. Justice isn't always perfect, but it was enough to know she'd have a felony conviction following her for the rest of her life. Every job application, every rental agreement, every new relationship, she'd have to explain what she did and why. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Crisp white envelope, return address from a law firm I didn't recognize. Melissa's divorce attorney. I opened it at my kitchen table, reading slowly. She was offering a settlement, $50,000, and a public apology, in exchange for dropping my civil lawsuit. The letter emphasized her deep remorse and sincere desire to move forward. I read the words twice, then set the letter down and laughed. $50,000 for trying to steal $2 million, for planning to have me locked away, for 8 years of condescension and manipulation. I picked up my phone and called Ramirez. I got Melissa's settlement offer, and tell her she can keep her $50,000. I'll see her in court. The final hearing came on a Friday morning in late September, just over 6 months since I'd overheard that conversation in Derek's office. The weather had turned cooler, the brutal Texas summer finally releasing its grip. I drove to the Collin County Courthouse wearing my best suit, the same one I'd worn to every important meeting in my professional life. This would be the most important meeting of all. The criminal sentencing hearing for Derek Bennett was held in courtroom 4B. I took a seat in the gallery, close enough to see everything but far enough to maintain my distance. Ramirez sat beside me. Derek was brought in by his public defender. He couldn't afford private representation anymore. He looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders hunched, eyes avoiding contact with anyone. 6 months of legal proceedings had aged him a decade. When he finally looked up and saw me, something flickered across his face. Not anger, not defiance. Something closer to shame, mixed with desperate hope. I held his gaze for a moment, then looked away. Judge Patricia Foster presided again. The same judge who dismissed his fraudulent guardianship petition now delivered his criminal sentence. Derek Bennett, you have pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person. Her voice was cold and measured. These are serious offenses, made more egregious by the fact that your victim was your own father. Derek's lawyer tried to interject about mitigating circumstances, but the judge silenced him with a look. I have considered the defendant's lack of prior criminal record and his cooperation with authorities. I have also considered the calculated nature of this scheme, the abuse of your position as an attorney, and the profound breach of familial trust. She paused, letting the silence build. Derek Bennett, I sentence you to 5 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and a fine of $75,000. Your license to practice law in the state of Texas is hereby permanently revoked. Derek's shoulders slumped. His lawyer whispered something, but he didn't seem to hear. He just stood there, a broken man in a borrowed suit, his entire career reduced to a criminal record and a fine he'd never be able to pay. I watched his face as the sentence was read. No satisfaction, exactly. More like the quiet resolution of an equation finally balanced. He'd made his choice. These were the consequences. The civil hearing that followed was almost anticlimactic. The judge reviewed our evidence and rendered judgment, $180,000 in my favor, representing triple damages for fraud. Derek couldn't pay, neither could Melissa, but the judgment would follow them forever, a permanent record of what they'd tried to do. After the hearing, I walked out of the courthouse alone. The Texas sun was warm on my face. Behind me, my son was facing the ruins of his life. His wife had divorced him. His career was destroyed. His freedom was conditional. And I was still standing. That Saturday, I went to my chess club at the Dallas Chess Foundation. My regular opponent, Ed Moreno, was already setting up our game when I arrived. Ed was 72, a retired engineer with a sharp mind and a dry sense of humor. We'd been playing together for almost a decade. "Harold," he nodded as I sat down, "heard about your legal troubles? Everything resolved?" "Resolved," I confirmed. "Finally." We played in comfortable silence for a while. Ed captured my knight. I countered by threatening his queen. The game flowed the way it always did. Strategy, patience, thinking 3 moves ahead. Halfway through, Ed looked up. "How's your family doing through all this? Your son, the lawyer?" I considered the question while studying my position. "You know, Ed," I said finally, moving my queen into position, "I learned something important. Family isn't about blood. It's about the people who respect you, the ones who stand by you, not the ones who try to take what you've built." Ed nodded slowly. "That's wisdom, Harold. Hard-earned, sounds like." "The hardest kind." I moved my queen 1 more square, completing the trap I'd set 3 moves ago. "Checkmate, by the way." Ed laughed and tipped over his king. "You always were 3 steps ahead." I smiled. "That's the only way to play." We reset the board for another game. Through the window I could see the afternoon sun casting long shadows. Another day ending, another chapter closing. My son had tried to steal my future. My daughter-in-law had tried to have me declared incompetent. They'd hired forgers, bribed doctors, filed fraudulent court documents. And in the end, they'd lost everything while I'd lost nothing but my illusions. The money was safe. My mind was sharp. My life was my own. I picked up my coffee, took a long sip, and started setting up the pieces for the next game. Outside, the Texas sun was setting over Dallas, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Life goes on, and from now on it would go on exactly the way I wanted it to, on my terms. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.